You said no once. And suddenly, they forgot every time you said yes. They forgot the nights you stayed awake, the meals you prepared when you were tired, the money you gave when you barely had enough, the peace you gave up so everyone else could feel comfortable. Then one day, you protected one small part of yourself, and suddenly, you became the problem. They called you selfish, not because you stopped caring, not because your heart became cold, but because they had grown comfortable with the version of you that never asked for anything back. At first, it hurts. It feels like proof that maybe you were wrong. Maybe you should have stayed quiet. Maybe love really does mean giving until nothing is left. But sometimes, life does not set you free by opening a beautiful door. Sometimes, life sets you free by letting people call you selfish, so you can finally see who benefited from your silence. This is the story of Asha, a woman who believed being good meant never becoming difficult, until the day she said no to the people she loved, and discovered that the boundary they called selfish was the doorway to her own life. Stay with this story, because the people who blamed you for changing may have been the same people who needed you to stay small. Asha lived in a small old town where mornings began before the sun rose. The streets were narrow, the houses leaned close together, and sorrow traveled quickly from one courtyard to another. Asha had been the eldest daughter for as long as she could remember. Not just in age, in duty. Her mother had died early. Her father, Dinesh, worked when his body allowed him to. Her younger brother, Rohan, had a bright smile and a habit of believing tomorrow would fix what today had broken. And Asha became the person everyone called when something went wrong. If someone was hungry, Asha cooked. If someone was short on money, Asha found coins. If Rohan made a mistake, Asha softened the consequence. If her father grew weak, Asha became strong. Without anyone naming it, she became the family's default rescuer. The one expected to notice, the one expected to absorb, the one expected to solve. People praised her for it. She is such a good daughter, they said. So dependable. So giving. At first, those words felt like love. But over time, they became a cage decorated with compliments. Every time Asha was tired, someone reminded her she was strong. Every time she hesitated, someone reminded her she was kind. And every time she wanted something for herself, guilt rose in her chest, as if desire itself were a form of betrayal. That is how many people lose themselves. Not because anyone ties their hands, but because praise becomes the rope. Asha had one dream she rarely spoke about. She wanted to open a small food stall near the market road. Nothing grand, just a clean wooden cart, a clay stove, and simple morning food made with care. For years, neighbors told her, "Asha, you should sell this." For years, she smiled and said, "One day." But one day had become the safest place to hide a dream. Every month, she saved a few coins in a small blue cloth pouch and tucked it behind a loose brick near the kitchen wall. It was not much, but to Asha, it was proof that some part of her still belonged to herself. Then life would happen. Her father needed medicine. Rohan needed help repaying a friend. An aunt needed rice. A cousin needed wedding cloth. And every time, Asha reached for the pouch. Just this once, she told herself, family comes first. I can start later. But later kept moving further away. Helping was not the wound. The wound was that everyone had learned to treat her sacrifice as the first solution. Before anyone changed. Before anyone took responsibility. Before anyone asked what the cost would be for her. They only noticed that she was useful. And usefulness, when it is never protected, can become a quiet form of disappearance. One evening, Rohan came home with dust on his sandals and panic in his eyes. He had invested money with a traveling trader who promised quick profit. Rohan had borrowed more than he admitted. Now, the trader was gone. The money was gone. And the men Rohan owed were asking questions. After dinner, he sat near Asha in the courtyard and spoke softly. "Didi," he said, "I need help." Asha already knew what those words meant. They had become familiar words in that house. Not a request, a signal that everyone would look toward her again. He did not look at her face. He looked toward the kitchen wall, toward the place where the blue pouch was hidden. "How much?" she asked. Rohan named the amount. It was almost everything she had saved. For a moment, the courtyard went still. Her father lowered his eyes. Her aunt sighed and said, "He is your brother." Rohan leaned closer. "I made a mistake," he said. "But family protects family." Asha felt those words enter her like an old command. Family protects family. She had lived by that sentence, but something inside her was too tired to obey it blindly one more time. She thought of the cards she had never bought, the mornings that were not hers, the dream hidden behind the brick, and for the first time, instead of reaching for the pouch, Asha folded her hands in her lap. "No," she said. It was not loud. That made it more frightening. Rohan stared at her. Her aunt's mouth tightened. Her father looked up. Asha swallowed. "I will help you speak to the men," she said. "I will help arrange honest payments. I will cook. I will work. I will stand beside you. But I will not give you the money I saved to begin my own life." The silence that followed was colder than anger. Then her aunt said the word that stayed with Asha all night. "Selfish." No one shouted for long. That was what made the pain harder. If they had screamed, Asha could have called it cruelty. But instead, the house became quiet in a way that punished her. Rohan stopped meeting her eyes. Her father said nothing, which hurt most. That night, Asha lay awake, listening to the courtyard settle into darkness. Inside her mind, one sentence repeated. "Maybe I am selfish." That is the guilt trap after you set a boundary. Not the boundary itself. The trap is what guilt begins to say about your character. Maybe I am ungrateful. Maybe I am not loving enough. Maybe I became hard. Maybe protecting myself means I failed the people who needed me. By morning, Asha almost changed her mind. She stood in the kitchen with the blue pouch in her hand. She could still give it. She could still make the house warm again. She could still become the version of herself everyone understood. The rescuer, the quiet one, the good one. But as she held the pouch, she noticed something. Her hand was shaking. Not from anger, from the terror of choosing herself for the first time. And in that trembling, she understood the truth she had avoided for years. She was not afraid of being selfish. She was afraid people would stop loving her if she was no longer useful in the same way. And this is where most people lose themselves again. Not because they are wrong, but because guilt can sound very similar to love. Asha was about to learn the difference. Later that morning, Asha walked to the old well at the edge of the market road. Women filled brass pots. Children ran through dust. Asha waited with an empty clay vessel beside her feet. Near the well sat Leela, an old widow who sold clay cups and water pots from a shaded mat. Her hands were rough. Her back was bent, but her eyes missed very little. Leela watched Asha for a while. Then she said, "That pot is not the only empty thing you brought here today." Asha tried to smile. "I said no to my brother," she whispered. Leela nodded. "And now they have called you selfish." Asha looked at her surprised. Leela picked up a clay cup from her mat. "Tell me," she said, "what makes this cup useful?" Asha frowned. "The clay." Leela shook her head. "The hollow space." Then she touched the rim. And this, Leela continued, without the hollow space it cannot receive. Without the rim it cannot hold. If this cup had no boundary, everything poured into it would be lost. She placed the cup in Asha's hands. People praise those who pour, Leela said. But they forget that even a cup must have an edge. Asha stared at the clay. Leela's voice softened. A boundary is not the enemy of love. It is what keeps love from becoming self-erasure. For a long moment, Asha said nothing. Because some truths do not feel like comfort when they first arrive. They feel like something inside you being returned to its proper place. The days that followed were not peaceful. Setting a boundary does not always bring immediate freedom. Sometimes, it brings distance first. Rohan spoke to Asha only when necessary. Her aunt told neighbors that Asha had changed. Her father still accepted the food Asha cooked, but his silence sat at the table like another person. Nothing terrible happened. No one threw her out. No one cursed her in the street. The punishment was smaller than that. Asha was no longer praised for being selfless. She was watched for signs of selfishness. If she rested, it proved she had become lazy. If she smiled, it proved she felt no guilt. If she worked on her own plans, it proved she cared more about herself than family. This is how some people respond when you stop playing the role that made their life easier. They do not always hate you. They simply do not know who they are allowed to be if you stop carrying what was never yours alone. Every evening, Asha wanted to explain herself. I still love you. I am not abandoning anyone. I am only trying not to abandon myself. But each time she remembered Leela's cup. Without a rim, everything poured into it would be lost. So Asha kept her boundary. Not with anger, not with pride, with trembling hands, and a heart learning a new kind of love. A week later, Asha took the blue pouch from behind the loose brick. She counted the coins 3 times. Not because the amount had changed, because she needed courage to believe it was still hers. Then, she walked to the market road and rented the smallest corner available. It was near the old banyan tree. The space was barely wide enough for her cart. The roof leaked when it rained, but to Asha, it felt larger than any room she had ever stood in. She bought a second-hand wooden cart, a small clay stove, 3 brass cups, and a piece of cloth she painted by hand with simple words, "Morning food, made fresh." The first morning, only 2 people came. One was Leela. The other was a schoolteacher who had always liked Asha's tea.